Welcome back to Fairfax Files. I want to make sure that I am clear with my entire audience before I move on to the story that I'm going to discuss. Nobody has been charged yet, and everyone is considered innocent until more information is released. I live in the Dominican Republic, and I thought it would only make sense for me to highlight this story about a young woman named Carly. She had a son, 8 years old now, old enough to ask questions, old enough to feel that something is wrong, but young enough to still not fully understand that his mother is never coming home. I'm a mom, and I have a son, and I couldn't imagine the pain that he would go through if he ever felt like something happened to me and he would never see me again. Carly Francesca Guzman Roach was 22 years old when she disappeared from Sosua, a sun drenched coastal town on the northern shore of the Dominican Republic. I live in Sosua. This happened in September 2021. Nearly 5 years now. Her family searched, they grieved, they pressed authorities, and they prayed. And then in 2026, January, a construction worker was digging a trench on a property in a gated community here in Sosua, and he found something that he should never have found and should not have ever been there. Human remains, buried, hidden, silent for years. Guys, those remains were confirmed through DNA testing that were matched to Carly's young son. Carly was identified as the victim that was buried. The property where she was buried had belonged to Michael Pennell Jr., a two-time Super Bowl champion, an 11-year NFL veteran, a man who has publicly denied he even knew her. Today, we're going to go through everything we know about this case because it has been reopened. We're going to talk about the victim, the timeline, the investigation, the questions that don't yet have answers, and what Carly's family has said after years of silence turned into the hardest of truth. Part one. Before we talk about the investigation, before we talk about the NFL, before we talk about the property of the politics of international criminal law, we need to talk about her. Because in cases like this, the person at the center of the story can sometimes get lost in the noise of the bigger name, the bigger institution, the bigger headline. And that would be a disservice to who Carly was. Carly Francesca Guzman Roche was 22 years old, originally from Banay, a city on the southern coast of the Dominican Republic. She was, by every account, from the people who loved her, a remarkable young woman. Her grandmother, Paula Gonzalez, described her to ESPN in words that paint a clear picture: beautiful, loving, and well liked by everyone who crossed her path. She called Carly a student, a young woman who was building something, moving towards something, not running away from anything. She had a son, a little boy who was just 3 years old when his mother disappeared, a child who is now 8 and who is old enough to understand the shape of loss, even if he cannot yet understand all of its edges. At some point before September 2021, Carly had moved to Sosua. This northern coastal town is one of the Dominican Republic's most internationally known resort communities. A lot of expats come here, and a lot of Dominicans come here to meet expats. It's a place where tourists come from across Europe, North America, and beyond. It's a place where worlds come together. Local Dominican life is pressed up against money and movement of international visitors. It's also a place where an American NFL player had made his secondary home. On September 5th, 2021, Carly was last heard from by her family. No call, no message, no contact. 8 days later, on September 13th, 2021, she was officially reported missing. A search was launched that, according to Dominican reporting, covered the entire province of Puerto Plata, where Sosua is located. And then, for years, nothing. No answers, no body, no arrest, no closure. Just a grandmother who told reporters she had no idea why her granddaughter would ever have had any reason to be at the villa where her remains were ultimately discovered. Just a little boy growing up without his mother, just a family waiting for truth that took almost 5 years to arrive. Now we need to talk about part two. Who is Michael Pinnell Jr.? Well, we have to talk about that man at the center of this investigation. Michael Pinnell Jr. is 34 years old. He was born in 1991 and entered the NFL as an undrafted free agent in 2014. For the next decade and beyond, he carved out what most players can only dream of, a 12-year professional football career. He went to the Green Bay Packers first, one of my favorite teams, then the New York Jets, then the Kansas City Chiefs, where he would eventually win not one, but two Super Bowl champions. He also spent time with the Atlanta Falcons, the Chicago Bears, and the Cincinnati Bengals. In the 2025 NFL season, just months before this story broke publicly, he was splitting time between the Bengals and the Chiefs. He is currently a free agent. By any measure of professional football, Pinnell had achieved something remarkable. He was a journeyman defensive tackle, not a superstar household name, but a trusted, useful piece on championship rosters. He was the kind of player that teams bring in because they know he'll do the job. No questions asked, no drama needed. And then the questions did come. Pinnell had developed a connection to the Dominican Republic over the years. He owned a home here, a villa in a gated community in Sosua. The Dominican Republic has become a popular destination for American athletes, celebrities, and a lot of investors. It's a place to come and buy a piece of property at a fraction of the cost, to come and vacation, to build a life outside the intensity of the NFL season. What we now know is this. At the time Carly Francesca Guzman Roach disappeared in September 2021, Michael Pinnell Jr. owned that property in Sosua. And it was on that property, on that land that was his, that her body was buried. Now let's get into the discovery. Part 3. January 2026. A construction worker is on the Sosua property, the property that Pinnell sold in 2025, the year before. The sale had already gone through. The new owner, or perhaps contractors working for the new owner, had initiated some kind of groundwork, digging a trench, and then the unthinkable. Human remains uncovered in the earth. Work would have stopped immediately, for sure. Authorities would have been called, of course. The Dominican Republic's public ministry, the National Prosecutor's Office, and the National Institute of Forensic Sciences, known as INACIF, were brought in. Investigators collected what they found. Forensic analysis began. The identification process took time, but the method was definitive: DNA testing. The forensic team obtained a biological sample from Carly's now 8-year-old son, compared it against the remains found on the property, and confirmed the match. The woman buried in that trench was none other than Carly Francesca Guzman Roach. From that moment, the case was no longer a missing persons matter. The Dominican Republic's National Attorney General's office officially reclassified the case. This was now a homicide investigation. A young woman had not simply disappeared. She had been killed, and she had been buried on property owned by a two-time Super Bowl champion. Let's look at the timeline. Part 4. In any criminal investigation, you should know the timeline is everything. It tells you who was there, when, and whether the pieces fit or don't fit. So let's walk through what we know. September 5th, 2021, Carly Guzman Roach is last heard from by her family. September 13th, 2021, she is officially declared missing. A province-wide search begins in Puerto Plata. August 31st, 2021, Michael Pinnell Jr. is released by the Chicago Bears. He is, at that moment, an NFL free agent with no team obligations. On September 15th, 2 days after Carly is reported missing, Pinnell signs with the Atlanta Falcons practice squad. So here is the window that investigators and legal observers are looking at. From roughly late August through mid-September 2021, Michael Pinnell Jr. was between NFL teams. He had no scheduled games, no mandatory team activities, no franchise tying him to a specific city. His attorney has stated clearly that Pinnell was not in the Dominican Republic during the period of Carly's disappearance. That is the official position of his legal team. But here is what remains publicly unconfirmed. As of early May 2026, no independent verification of that alibi has been released by investigators or announced by prosecutors. No official statement has confirmed whether travel records, passport data, phone records, or any other documentation has been reviewed and cleared Pinnell's presence from the Dominican Republic during that critical window. The alibi exists, whether it has been proven, truly and independently verified, remains an open question. 2025, Pinnell sells the Sosua property. January 2026, the construction workers find the remains. April 25, 2026, Dominican Republic authorities officially name Michael Pinnell Jr. as a person of interest in the homicide investigation. ESPN breaks the story, citing 2 sources close to the probe. That is the timeline as it stands right now. Now we have to look at part five, which is Pinnell's response. When the story broke publicly in late April 2026, just a month ago, Michael Pinnell Jr. did not stay silent. He came right out the gate immediately. He responded. But the nature of his response raised as many eyebrows as it lowered. In a text message to ESPN, Pinnell wrote this: "This isn't a story. I'm not legally involved. This is fake news being reported. I'd advise you to speak with my agent and lawyer before writing a false story, damaging my reputation." That was his first public statement. A few things worth noting about those words. He called it fake news. But here in the Dominican Republic, the National Attorney General's office had issued an official statement confirming the homicide classification. The Dominican Forensic Institute, INACIF, had confirmed Carly's identity through DNA. These are not opinions. These are official government findings. He said he was not legally involved. That is a specific choice of phrasing. Being named a person of interest does not mean someone has been charged. It does mean they are just that, a person of interest. Now, no charges have been filed against him, but it is not the full picture of where things stand. Shortly after news broke, Pinnell deactivated his Instagram account. His Dominican attorney, Alexander Balbuena, struck a different and notably more cooperative tone. Balbuena told reporters that Pinnell has full cooperation to offer Dominican authorities, and that his client's primary concern has been to get to the truth of what happened. Balbuena maintained that Pinnell did not know Carly Guzman Roche, and that Pinnell was not in the country at the time of her disappearance. Pinnell also told reporters as of the weekend the story broke that Dominican investigators had not yet directly contacted him. That itself raises questions. If you are a person of interest in a homicide investigation and investigators have not yet contacted you, where exactly is that investigation? Now let's look at part six, the investigation and how far it has gone. As of the first week of May 2026, the Dominican Republic's homicide investigation into Carly Guzman Roche's death is officially described as being in its early stages. Here is what investigators have done. They have confirmed the victim's identity through DNA. They have officially reclassified the case as a homicide. They have named Michael Pinnell Jr. as a person of interest. They have broadened their inquiry to include multiple individuals, described by Dominican authorities as foreigners connected to the Sosua area. Local Dominican media reporting, including from El Caribe, identifies 3 American nationals as among those questioned. They have not released a cause of death. They have not made any arrests. They have not publicly confirmed or denied whether Pinnell's claimed alibi, that he was not in the country during the relevant period, has been independently verified. Forensic analysis continues. Witness interviews continue. Dominican prosecution sources have indicated the investigation will follow forensic leads. That suggests there may be physical evidence still being processed, trace material from the burial site, forensic examination of the remains themselves, or other investigative threads not yet disclosed publicly. What the investigation has not done, at least publicly, is close any doors or open any cell doors. No one has been charged. No one has been arrested. The case remains active, open, and developing. For Carly's family, that means the hardest part of their ordeal, the waiting, has not ended. It has only changed form. Once they waited to find out what happened to her, now they wait to find out who will be held responsible. Ladies and gentlemen, we will let you know exactly what is happening as the time goes on, because the short answer is based on everything publicly available as of May 2026. And nothing has been publicly confirmed. But as soon as things that are typically confirmed, like travel records, passport stamps, financial transactions in another country, phone signal data, witness corroboration from wherever Pinnell claims to have been, when all of that has been released and verified and publicly confirmed by Dominican prosecutors, then we will update you and let you know. Right now, as it stands, there is not a lot of proof that Michael Pinnell Jr. is guilty, or the three other foreigners that have been questioned. But again, I will keep you updated. This is Fairfax Files. Thank you so much for joining. Please go ahead and subscribe if this is your type of content. And don't forget to hit that like button. It lets me know that you enjoyed this video. Thanks for stopping by. See you next time.